Hello, Steve. Hi. Can you bear with us just for 1 second as we start the meeting, and then I'll turn it over to you? Is that fair enough?
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I call the meeting to order. You got the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Ark, I would call in the roll, please.
Ms. Dees,
Present.
Ms. Weger,
Here.
Ms. Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Thompson,
Here.
Mr. Loudermilk.
Here. I'm here too, yes. I was trying to do two things there. Thank you, Mr. Otter. I'd like to open this time for public comment. It appears there is none. We'll move on now, move ahead to receiving the information from Mr. Minor with Baker Tilly. Are you there?
Yes, indeed. We are hearing you loud and clear. Are you able, all of you, able to hear us clearly as well?
Yes, we are.
Sir.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be with you today, and particularly we appreciate the opportunity to do so through a Zoom call. It's very helpful and convenient, and we appreciate that opportunity. Calissa had gotten some information from us only a couple of days ago. This came together fairly quickly. I hope you've had the opportunity at least to have that in front of you. And I assume that you do. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Great. There were two items, one of which was the a larger document just in general about some background about us. It also included our typical process we would use in a comprehensive compensation and classification study. So I'm not gonna even try to go through all of that in depth. You can read it; it's there. I'll just tell you a little bit about our background. Obviously, you're familiar with not only Baker Tilly, but our partners that we joined in. We merged in with Baker Tilly at the same time that Umbah did. So we were with Springstead. You may have heard of Springstead or maybe not, but a company that did some of the same things Umbah did, including some bond work. But we also had at Springstead our group that does compensation and classification work. And in one guise or one name or another, that company has been using our system, the SAFE job evaluation system that we talk about in our materials, for about 30 years. So it's been around a long time. Before I get too much further, I'm remiss in not having let you know, introduce you to Jada Kent. Jada is with us on the call. She's joining in from Plano, Texas, where her office is. Jada is a manager in our system. She's included in the proposal, but also has a CCP certificate from World at Work, and is very knowledgeable about comp and class work, and is sort of the linchpin of our operation, to be honest. So Jada, thank you for joining and being with us. I don't know how you would like to proceed or how you prefer to proceed. We have a short PowerPoint that we often use to just walk people through that process and help them understand how it works, how it would work for you in general, and if we move forward with this project. So be very happy to take a few minutes and step through that. Jada can help with that as well. And then following that, perhaps time for questions, whatever variety you may have.
I think that'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, let me see if I can make this part work. Okay, are you seeing that screen?
Yes.
With colored squares or rectangles on it?
Yes.
Okay, super. Well, basically what you're looking at is our process, start to finish. We have 5 different phases that we like to think of that we go through in doing a full comprehensive classification compensation study. And let me be clear, when I refer to comprehensive, that's one in which we would do all of the elements of a full comprehensive classification compensation study. And as we go through this, you'll soon recognize that some clients may not need all of this, but many do, and this is a typical project. So the first step is data collection. Part of that's going to be data from you. We can't work on a project without getting information from the client about what you have, about information relative to what you're currently paying, what the positions are, some of the other stuff that you can see on item 2, a bunch of material that we normally ask for and bother your HR staff to present or prepare for us. So we ask for all of that. We have a process asking for that. We'll meet with the group, and in your case, in any case, it could be whoever wants to be involved in this part of the process. Originally, those first meetings are very, very important to help us understand more about what the expectations and the needs of the organization are relative to comp and class. We need to find out more about where you're hurting. Most people, there's a reason you do a study, right? So usually that entails some better understanding on our part of which positions perhaps that you're having difficulty recruiting for or holding within your organization, or other issues of concern. So also comp philosophy, compensation philosophy, to the degree that you have one. Not all do, but to the degree that you have elements of a comp philosophy already in place, it's helpful at that time for us to learn about that philosophy and what it is, who you see as your competitors for labor, what your labor market is, some of those things relating to comp philosophy. So once we've done that, and we've got a good understanding of each to the other of what the process should include and what will include, so that everyone is clear up front, the leadership of the group is clear about what to expect and what we're going to do, and when and how we expect to do that, and when, importantly, their input is going to be needed. We move on to communication meetings, and these are pretty standard for us. We like to be very transparent in our process, and we ask clients to make their staff available to us. We'll start with a management group and explain it to the management group, because they have an important role, obviously, to play in all of the work that's about to come. However, we always start with that, but then we move on very quickly to the larger group of all staff. And so we present essentially the same presentation to both groups. It's slightly different for management due to some of their added responsibilities, but still we do ask to give those presentations so that everyone understands what's coming, how it's going to work, and importantly, we actually go through the instrument that I referred to earlier. SAFE is predicated on a position analysis questionnaire where we collect information directly from employees. So I'm going to go through a little more detail about that in just a moment. But at any rate, that's part of what the communication meeting is about. Once those communication meetings are completed, Our next step then is to release the PAQ and distribute that to employees so that they can fill it out and giving us the information we need to plug into our safe job evaluation model. That actually goes to employees. They'll have a period of time to fill it out. We certainly make ourselves available if they have any questions, technical questions, or just in general about anything about the process. During the time they're filling out, we're always open for that. And secondly, once they're completed, at some point, that gets forwarded on to the supervisor, and the supervisors comment and review that work that the employees have provided on the position analysis questionnaire. So I'm going to go on to the market assessment phase next, which would be following that. Once we get those PAQs, they're the basis for a lot of the work that we do thereafter, and certainly on the internal side, on the internal equity side of the process. We'll collect that information, look over it, review all the positions to ensure that the job titles are appropriate and equitable. We will make recommendations to whomever we're working directly with so that they can carry that message back into the organization. Those recommendations are preliminary. They're not something that really affects what's to come in terms of job evaluation, but it is sort of an added value we like to provide at that juncture of the process. It is an opportunity to consolidate titles, look for adjustments to make sure that the titles are generally appropriate for the level and type of work being performed by the individual. So that's something that's a good time to do that. The job evaluation system, SAFE, that I've been referring to, has 9 factors, and there are those 9 factors you see in front of you. One of the things that we're really perhaps most proud of is there's a lot of job factor systems out there. They're one of the more common and bulletproof ways to do this work. So we're one of several in the marketplace that does evaluation in this manner. However, our system was developed for local government and has been in use, as I said, for these 30 years now. We have done literally many hundreds of studies over that period of time using this system. It has been tweaked a little here and there over the years, but essentially it's the same system that was developed originally. And I believe it started within the state of Minnesota when the state there required localities to have some system of classification and SAFE, or the Springstead folks developed it and marketed it initially within the state, but then it grew outside of it. We've had an office in Virginia for a long time. We've done work, however, in many states across the country. Those compensable factors, as we like to refer to them, are all embedded in the PAQ. So the information we get from the position analysis questionnaire informs us about how to grade each job, and it gives us a basis for doing that in a fair, equitable manner. Those are the elements, those 9 elements or factors that are included in SAFE, in our job evaluation system. If you take a quick look at those, as you can see, nothing there really surprising. These are all things that you might think about if you're trying to compare one job against another one internally, when they may often do very different types of work. This gives you a fair and appropriate basis to rank jobs as a result of this analysis for the internal equity, the internal evaluation of ranking is so important for a variety of things, but primarily the Equal Pay Act and the various and sundry outgrowths of equal pay that's been developed over the years, including some fairly recently. The system stands up well to all of those types of systems because A, we don't use individual information. This is about the job. It's not about the person. It's about the design of the job. It's about the design of what's needed to get the job done. And individual information is not really relevant, frankly, to the scoring on that. So how long someone's been at work, any of their identifying characteristics are not needed, requested, or important to us, quite frankly, relative to the job evaluation portion of the work. We will also at that time, we will have obtained information on the work they're actually doing from the horse's mouth, from the employees themselves, with input from their supervisors that allows us to give you new job descriptions and or FLSA status review if that's something that's desired. So that's pretty much that part of the process. There's a note at the bottom, and we'd like to always point out that some positions are already they're already in a hierarchy, particularly those in public safety. We see that most commonly, frankly, with police departments, fire departments, where they already have a hierarchy built into their system, and so these are not as critical for the point factor evaluation based on what you already have. We can use that. Moving on to phase 3, the market assessment. If Jada, you would have a moment to jump in and help here, can take this on.
So with the market assessment, we would be partnering with the county to help you all identify which peer organizations you would want us to compare you to. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to tell you who you're losing employees to because you know that. So there's so many things to consider when we're coming up with this list. It's not just who looks like you in terms of the size of your organization, what kinds of services are you providing to the community, what is your revenue, your population served, your number of employees, but also, for certain communities that are kind of experiencing a unique kind of growth, we can target other communities like that. Inside Indiana or outside, we can cast a wide net if we need to, because we can apply a geographic differential to that data. So, and that's a cost of labor adjustment, not necessarily a cost of living. It does take cost of living into consideration, but it's more the supply and demand of labor in a given region, so that you can say, okay, administrative assistant in Vigo County versus, Kansas City, Missouri. What are the comparable the regional pay differences happening for that position? And so because of that, we can make an apples to apples comparison for any organization across the country. So whoever you want to include in your peer list, assuming that there's, a business need and can be justified, we wouldn't want to just shove Beverly Hills in there for the sake of trying to get higher comps. But, we will partner with you. We'll use who you want to use. And we'll go out and we'll contact those peer organizations directly. This is a custom market study, so we'll get those data, the salary data information for those positions that match yours. And then we also use a series of published survey sources. And that really stands as the private sector representative in our data set, because I'm sure you guys are losing employees to private sector organizations, but it never fails. We can try to call them up all day long. They're not going to say, yeah, please publish our salaries in your public report. So we use published survey data to kind of be that private sector representative instead. We have a couple on hand that we use routinely. We also get a lot of requests to use, if you've got specialized areas like electric, we have the American Public Power, we have American Water Works. So if you have specialized areas, we can use those salary surveys as well. So like I said, we'll distribute the survey, collect that data directly from those organizations. We'll also ask them information about their pay practices, their pay policies, how are they moving their employees through the pay range? And by the way, what does your pay range look like? How many grades do you have? Questions like that, so that we can come back to you and help you make a decision about, should we tweak your pay plan in this way? Should we be more competitive by doing this that way? And then also in the survey, we include questions about fringe benefits, so health insurance, time off, paid leave, things to that nature. And then once all of the data is compiled, we will calculate it, determine market average rates, and we have a series of quality control standards that we take very seriously. We require a certain amount of matches per benchmark before we can draw a conclusion and do a calculation of that data set. Following all the best practices, and we present that information to you. We'll show you, here's your market results. Do you want to be at market for your positions? Do you want to lead? Do you want to lag? Some organizations may, based on compensation philosophy, based on financial ability, may decide to lag the market because they're paying more, or they want to pay more in benefits, and so they'll lag the market a little bit on pay to kind of offset that cost. Or vice versa. We're working with a client in Indiana right now who has electric, which is really market competitive. It didn't make sense to leave them in the general pay plan, so we pulled them out. We gave them a really aggressive pay plan for those electric positions. And then we kept a general pay plan that was just kind of standard for everyone else. And then we did a third option. Public safety is a little bit of a unique beast, so we created a third pay plan for them to kind of address those needs. And so that's something that we can do with the county as well, based on if your departments are seeing, different challenges internally or externally, meaning, internal values versus market values. We can build any number of pay plans to help address those challenges and make sure that your employees are competitively paid and, you're not just having a bunch of turnover. You're able to develop your future leaders within your organization. Okay, and so then for the pay plan development, we will use the results from the job evaluation process and the market study, and we'll kind of overlay those results with a regression analysis to see how well is internal and external data points kind of, setting on top of each other. Very often they're close, not 100%, because there's always going to be a position whose internal value to the organization is so high. You could not operate without them, but the market salary is just not there. And so that doesn't mean you need to go pay what the market says to pay them. That they're still valuable to your organization. So that's an example of an outlier where we would kind of work with you to pinpoint those, decide where does it make sense to plug this person into the pay plan despite what the market says to pay them and despite what your internal value is. Where's a good compromise to put that position? So we'll use the regression as kind of our framework for letting the internal and the external data drive those position to grade classifications. We keep saying these buzzwords, compensation philosophy. So based on the county's desired position within the market, but also your financial ability, we can set your pay plan to be aligned to the market at whichever threshold you need it to be to make sure you're attracting and retaining candidates. But that also may impact how your pay policies are currently written. So if you've got some policies on the books right now, and then we build you a different pay plan that's going to kind of blow that up, we'll look at those with you. We'll help you make some assessments and adjustments if that's needed as well. And then once we have the new pay plan, once we know where all of the positions should be classified into that pay plan, we'll develop implementation scenarios for you. So, okay, this is nice, we have a new pay plan, but how much is it going to cost? And so we have 3 standard options that we usually look at. The first one is, okay, anybody whose current salary is below the new proposed minimum, we want to first get them up to the minimum, because step 1 is you can't adopt a pay plan unless everybody's in it first. And so that's usually, the ones who are most severely underpaid, we want to get them at least to their minimum. And then from there, we can start looking at across the board increases if you wanted to do that. And then the third scenario we often use is an increase per years in position, which is probably our favorite scenario because it's a consistent way of plugging people into their pay range that's relative to the years in position. So if you think of a police officer who just stepped out of training versus one who's been doing it for 10 years, those two should not be paid the same, right? They're not the same police officers. They need to be paid at a rate that's fair to the kind of work that they're performing, even in the same title. And so, we would apply a certain fixed percentage based on their year in that position to kind of move them through the range at a fair rate. So this option helps with, if you've got issues with pay compression, even pay equity, this third option would help solve those problems. And then last, we, write it all up in a report, document our findings, document the results, document our recommendations based on those results. We also will train your HR staff to use our safe job evaluation system. So as your positions are shrinking, they're growing, they're consolidating, you are having new positions, the safe job evaluation system will allow you to kind of go in there, tweak the ratings for existing jobs, add new jobs, and it'll pump out what grade those positions need to be in relative to the rest of the organization. So we'll teach the HR staff how to use that, how to maintain the pay structure going forward. And that way, we're not just dropping all of this on you and saying good luck. We want you to actually use it. And then we'll also, all of the documentation that we collect throughout the study, the position analysis questionnaires, Steve mentioned we would be doing new job descriptions. So all of that, we would make sure you had copies of all of the documentation throughout the study.
Okay, Jaden, thank you very much. I really appreciate. There's one thing I probably should add on the implementation slide back on phase 4. We have those 3 standard implementations. We do work with clients, however, glad to do so on additional plans if Aristotle plans aren't what you need or want. We've had clients to spread this over more than 1 year. Sometimes that is a necessity based on whatever the findings were in the study and their desire to meet or perhaps even exceed the market, but nonetheless, I just wanted to point out that we'll work with you. I guess that's the end of the slide, so I can go ahead and shut this down. It's important that I think we recognize that, first of all, it's important to answer any questions. We won't forget to answer questions, but our process is somewhat iterative. We have meetings during the process to, on occasion, schedule meetings with whoever our point of contact is. We have some clients that actually use a committee. We'll meet with the committee, and sometimes it's a committee of department heads. Sometimes, it's just internal for the organization. It depends on who and how the client wants to do that. But we'll meet and work to ensure that they're getting preliminary data when we've developed it, so they can see what we're seeing. We always want to make sure that we've gotten it right. When you're dealing with a PAQ, position analysis questionnaire, sometimes different people can approach filling that out slightly differently, and because we use that to develop literally points and assessments of the job evaluation, it's really important that we take some time during the process to go over our preliminary findings with you, so that everyone's sort of on the same page. Have we got it right? Did we miss something? We find sometimes that the PAQs aren't always consistent. Sometimes we don't interpret the data as perfectly. So either way, we find that quality control requires we spend a fair amount of time with the client during the process to ensure that you're getting something that's useful and has value as long as possible. No comp plan, no compensation plan is going to stay solid, stay good forever. Change occurs, that happens, we understand that. The market changes for certain jobs. But at the end of the day, our goal is to leave all of our clients with a very solid plan that meets their needs. It's really that simple, and this is the process we use to get there. And be glad to answer any questions. That's pretty much all we had. We didn't want to make it too painful for you to go through. We have a longer presentation. This was the short one, believe it or not. But we've appreciated the opportunity to present, and be glad now to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from council?
You had mentioned, and I tried to write notes in this area, looking at areas that maybe we may be losing staff to, or where there might be shifting. And it sounded like more like outside organizations. Do you ever look within the organization itself, like if there's, employees going from one department to another, or because of different positions or things like that? Or is that part of the process too, like looking within, because we have a lot of employees?
Go ahead, Jada, take it.
Yeah, so I worked with a county in Michigan who had this exact problem where every time a job would open in one department, everybody would rush to go apply to it. And they were just losing their own employees to themselves. And so really our job evaluation system is going to help with that, because it sounds like if you've got a lot of jobs that are very transferable for those skills, and we need to make sure that the pay for those is equitable enough that they don't need to go leave their job where it's very similar to go do this other job, but they can get more money. So the internal equity of those positions would be evaluated, but also looking at the market to make sure that they're being paid fairly. So it sounds like there may be some overlap in positions that needs to be looked at.
Okay, thank you.
There's another thing that we do that's it's kind of part of the record that helps us understand what's happening. Besides the initial meeting that I referred to, of course, which we always do ask them what's going on, try to find out more about the organization. We also have a short survey that we ask the client to distribute internally to department heads. And we're asking on that survey, we're asking the kinds of issues they're seeing, if any. Who are they losing people to? Do they have any concerns, current or existing concerns about classification issues inside their departments, and so forth? So any special needs or issues. So hopefully we're giving folks ample opportunity to describe to us any problems that they may be having, including the one like you just described. So I know I was a manager for a long time in the public sector, and I used to lose most of my department heads. Sooner or later, they would go up the road to a county that was next door and a little larger, a little more wealthy, and I used to get kind of irritated a little about. Bottom line is there wasn't a lot I could do about it, but nonetheless, those are the kind of things we want to know, where your needs are, and so our ears are open for exactly those kinds of issues, and we're working with you to look for solutions anywhere we can.
And kind of, I think you already answered it, but you mentioned, I think it's called a PAQ, a questionnaire that you have to kind of learn about the employees as well. But just to understand the process, you meet with department heads. Do you meet with the employees on a personal level as well, or in groups to kind of go over that as well? Because some people are just more verbal than written, and so I just want to make sure that, we're all on the same page on how we do that.
Great question. We do a group meeting at the kickoff to explain the process. We also go over all the PAQ, literally question by question.
Okay.
Very often, Jada leads that part of the discussion, but we because it's so important, the PAQ is the foundation really for the results, and so we can always pretty much sort them out regardless, but we like to get the high quality information up front. So that's one of the reasons, not to mention the fact that we just find that going in and making that connection directly with employees is helpful, and not only to us in doing our job, but for them to understand what's going on, and it gives it a little more real flavor, and we are not just some group that bundled in from out of town. We do this for a living, and we care about our clients.
Yeah, and also pre-pandemic life, we used to come on site, spend a whole day where we would have back-to-back, employees just pick this time slot that works for them. They'd come in and we'd give this presentation over and over so everybody had a chance to hear it straight from us. These days, we do it through Zoom. I suppose if you guys, however you wanted to handle that, whatever your concerns are for like Steve said, having people come in from outside or not. We can do it through Zoom. We'll record the meeting, so anybody who couldn't join, they can always watch it back later. But then also, if we, like you said, some people are better verbal than, writing it down. If we start getting a lot of inconsistencies on the PAQ, I mean, we're going to kind of recognize that, we'll flag it, and then we may also do a follow-up job audit with those employees or groups of employees, just to make sure that we're getting a holistic view of what is this job, where does it overlap with other jobs, does it not overlap at all, well, if they're doing the same thing, should they be called the same thing, things like that. So there could possibly be an opportunity, not for everyone, but if we do see issues, we may do a job audit as well.
Hey, I guess that does bring a question in my mind. So if we go ahead with this, and we've got a little bit of information about this, and this was great tonight to get a lot more information, but can you give us a scenario on timeline? You gave us a PowerPoint that showed the steps, but I didn't see any timeline reflective of that for the size that we're dealing with.
Yeah, we've got one that I developed for this project, and I apologize, I did not include it in that information I sent. I'll be glad I can get that out to you ASAP. Might be able to pull it up and take a quick look. This is about a 6 or 7 month process, but usually. But let me see what I worked up in this document that I sent out. I apologize, I should have provided this. I'm just going to run it down here. Here we go. When I looked at this originally, assuming a start date of September 1, which was a little bit arbitrary, I didn't know when it would start, but assuming a start date of September 1, I have us complete with a draft final report starting somewhere around mid to late February. It might run into March depending on what happens in the project, but in general it would be the first quarter, toward the mid to the latter part of the first quarter of 2022.
And I would also point out that kind of getting started September 1 is the arbitrary date. I mean, we're talking about getting into the holidays soon. So whether we're asking your employees to fill out PAQs or we're asking peer organizations for their salary data, come November and December, it's really difficult to get anybody to do anything, I'm sure you know. So some of that time is just because we don't have control over the holidays.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, I will send that on to Calista so she'll have it and you can actually see it in person. I had worked up a schedule for it, and this is based on several assumptions. I want to be sure that I'm clear about that. We do, as I said earlier, the process is somewhat iterative, where, in other words, we're taking preliminary data to you, getting your feedback, we have to set meetings up and have those discussions to talk about them. And so, the bottom line is, we assume a certain amount of turnaround time in our scheduling for that. We think it's a reasonable amount, but inevitably we find that schedules don't ever quite come out the way we hope. Sometimes some elements will go a little faster, but usually due to the need for the meetings and so forth, it can stretch out a little bit. And that's, that is what it is. We can't force clients to get back to us on a schedule that they can't meet or doesn't work for them. So we do respect them for that.
I have a quick question. You mentioned that you would use who we wanted to use as comps. What's the percentage of input there? Because as a county, I would assume that you would want to use other counties that are of similar size and whatever other factors that would factor in to make a very comparable comparison in counties. I guess I don't know how I'm wording my question, but how much of it are we going to be responsible for telling you we want to compare with this county or that county, or do you do that type of research to find out which counties would be comparable to Vigo County and then compare with those, if that makes any sense?
Well, it makes perfect sense. One of the reasons we like to use your list, frankly, is that it's your marketplace, and your folks, maybe not any one person there, but collectively, we ask everyone, we'll find out where people are going to. And if there are other organizations that you compete with, because this is a market study, this is the aspect that is really kind of critical, because you're not competing for labor with organizations 100 miles away, probably. Maybe you are. It's a pretty long commute. Certainly not 200 miles away. I can use that safely. But the point is, you're going to know that as well or better than we do. There is a standard assumption in compensation work that you want to try to compare yourself to similar organizations. And that's nice to say, but sometimes hard to do because organizations do tend to be unique. And at the same time, you're in a competitive marketplace. And the goal of doing a comp study, among other things, there's several reasons for doing one, but among other things, you want to be competitive. You want to make sure that you can, you know what it takes to pay certain positions in order to attract the candidates of choice that you want and hold the talent that you already have. So the bottom line is, we'll provide input and advice. We're certainly glad to do that. We often do. But it starts really with some discussion and thought inside your organization by the appropriate decision makers as to who you're competing with for talent, to be honest with you. It really comes down to that first and foremost.
And I mean, we can do all kinds of research. I've got Google Maps. I can look, from Texas, I can tell you who I think you should compare yourself to. But what we really mean at the end of the day is we want to make sure that we have buy-in from you on who that list is. Because we've got horror stories about getting all the way to the end of the study, and then the mayor stands up and says, well, I don't like those organizations. Well, now the whole study is moot. So really that list just needs to have buy-in at the highest level in your organization before we start going and pulling that data.
It is in fact one of the elements of some localities that do have pay philosophies or compensation philosophies. Sometimes they're written out and more formal. They often will have a group of organizations to which they compare themselves for a variety of reasons, but certainly in terms of pay, very commonly we'll find that organizations have a list included in that comp philosophy. So these are the organizations historically they can compare themselves to. Now they can change that comp philosophy and, over time, sometimes things change, but still, as a rule, they try to have a list that they have developed that they compare themselves with for a variety of reasons. You may have such a list. Either way, we certainly provide input and glad to do that on elements that we think are important.
Just a government entity is a unique animal. We have, obviously, our money is revenue. Our revenue is, and our money that we pay the employees with is tax-driven. And so I would think, I'm just brainstorming here, but I would think that we would want comparable counties and other government entities that we would be comparing with, knowing that our assessed valuation of houses and that sort of thing plays a big part in this. I would love for everybody to make $100,000 a year. It's not sustainable, not possible. And you start making these large leaps in income for people, the money's got to come from somewhere, so they're making more money, but we're taxing the general public that much more to raise that money, and it's not sustainable. So I'm just concerned that we're more looking this more generic, and as far as businesses, knowing that the government aspect of it is very unique. And I'm hoping that we are going to compare it with other government entities rather than just other corporations and businesses. Can you
Oh,
answer?
absolutely. We only represent clients in the public sector, so let's be clear about that.
Okay.
We don't do private sector work.
Thank you.
We have perhaps done a few nonprofits over the years, maybe other governmental type agencies, but we, by and large, only do government work. So we are with you 100%. We understand. I've managed in the public sector. Jada has a master's of public administration. She's worked with a lot of clients over the years as well. So the point is, we get you, we understand, and we respect and know, that your resources are precious to you for a lot of reasons. But, and frankly, because of many of your jobs, they're likely only, to be honest with you, to go to another government. So
Right.
if you're looking at your market, you're going to want to look at those jobs in other governments, because I'll use a planner. There's private jobs for planners, but for the most part, public planners are going to look for other jobs within public agencies. For example, I'm just using that as an example. There are some jobs, you can pull one out of the hat. Truck drivers comes to mind, equipment operators, stuff like that, folks like that who very often can find work. Support staff very often can find work outside of your organization. So we make that information available, should you desire to look at it, so you can have a full view of the market for any given position. However, I will say you're clearly, we on board with what you're talking about. We know what you mean.
I appreciate that, and I apologize that I wasn't aware that you mainly work with government agencies and public.
My apologies. We should have clarified that from the get-go. But yeah, that was our foundation. That's how we got started, and that's what we've been doing for the past 30 years.
Awesome.
We really specialize in public organizations.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Steve, if I'm understanding you, then what you're saying is when you pick out some of the private firms in our community and see what they're paying, and then if that's to whom we're losing our people, we need to figure out what we can do to address that sort of thing. I mean, that's a reasonable assumption, that to say, well, golly, you might be able to do thus and such, or look over here, your folks are going up to university, or your folks are going out to the refrigerated dough products place because they have another day off, or they have that sort of thing. Am I grasping that correctly?
Yeah, let's just say it's a targeted analysis in that sense. So yes, you're getting that right. We want to make sure that we're looking at organizations that you're literally losing people to, or fear you may. We don't try to generalize public versus private. We're just trying to find out your market idiosyncrasies, and every market has them. It depends on the place and the jobs and whatever's going on, sometimes even in the economy at that time in that region or location. So it can be highly specific and specialized. But again, that's part of what we're doing, getting the information on, so we can analyze and get you the right data so that you can have that in your arsenal to look at and understand. Our goal, among other things, is to give you a good understanding of the market there and what your organization is challenged to do in order to attract and hold talent.
And we may not be able to address some of the problems in our community for sure. I mean, you know, we can't pay $80,000 to the folks who are going to be getting jobs down at the steel place, but we can address the ones we are able to address.
Yes, absolutely. We're, Jada covered that in her part of the presentation, I thought, very nicely. And, you know, the reality is, you are a public organization. Money doesn't grow in trees. You're spending public dollars, and you'll make sure you're getting a return on investment for those dollars. At the end of the day, that's critically important for everyone, and we understand that. But the bottom line is, by giving you more information, we hope to enable you to make the decision you feel is best for your organization. We're not going to come in and be dictatorial. That's not who we are. It's not how we work. We share information, we inform, and again, also as Jada pointed out, comp philosophy may be a word we've used a little too much here this evening, but you know, different places look at their marketing area and they just have to decide what can we do. We've had places that don't go to the market because they don't feel they can afford to, or they take more than 1 year to get there. Sometimes that happens. If we deliver a study and Fund Life finds that they're off further from the market than they might want to be, or that they can't necessarily afford to catch up, sometimes they have to take a little more time to get there, or develop a plan, or sometimes just accept the fact, as you pointed out, that they can only do what they can do. And in doing so, you've given the problem a solid look. You've analyzed it, and you're doing what is ultimately an executive or elected group's decision. What's the right thing to do for our organization? And you're there to help make those decisions, and you know far better than anyone else what the right answers are if you're given the right information. And that's our job, is to give you that information.
Thank you.
Steve, I just have a couple questions. So we talked earlier about the PAQs, and it was discussed what you did pre-pandemic and what you do now with the Zoom meeting with the smaller groups. Is that correct? Are those groups generally, are they within that specific department? Is that how you group up these individuals to present to them?
Well, first of all, let me be clear. We'll work with you to do it the way you feel the needs are. If you want smaller group meetings, we can do that. That is not a problem. We have, we're very open to working with clients to get things the way they want them to be. Historically, before COVID, yes, we would come on site. We would have meetings with the management team in person. We would then go out and have individual meetings with the staff, and the client would set those up for us, and we would work on their schedule. So it depended on who we were, what the client was, what their needs were. Sometimes you have shift workers. We would meet with them and maybe early in the morning when they were coming off shift, or we would meet later in the day before they started a late shift or whatever. So the point is, we're trying to be very flexible in that regard. Our pricing doesn't limit us necessarily. We do try to keep it within some reasonable limit. We can't do it one-on-one, but the bottom line is we're flexible in approaching that. So if it's helpful to your staff to have more direct contact, we're absolutely open to doing it that way.
Okay, I think that's maybe something we can discuss with the department heads, but I would just assume that the PAQs are probably the most important piece of this process, because if this was conducted during a Zoom call and maybe it wasn't conveyed to certain members how important certain aspects of the PAQ actually was, then it's going to throw everything off, correct?
That is correct. We also put in, I believe it was $3,000 for expenses, and so really we don't charge extra for the time to come there. That's part of our base fee. We do charge for the hard cost. you know, hotel rooms, lodging, food, you know, those kinds of things, up to that cap. So proposal we've got in place on this project now, I think, had us at $3,000 on hard cost. And that should be plenty to get us there as often as you need us and to meet with the staff as necessary.
Great, thank you. The other question I had was concerning project completion. Once everything has been concluded and the package is put together, it's my understanding that the HR staff is trained to make changes or change implementations in the future, or adjustments in maybe compensation and classifications. Is that it? Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely. We like to say you're not just buying a study, you're getting the system that's behind it. And we've got a lot of clients who find that very useful. We've got some that the moment we walk out the door, I think they can't find that thing. But nonetheless, we care about it, and we have a lot of clients who care about it. And so, yeah, that training is important. What you get with that, it's a fairly simple manual that describes the SAFE job evaluation system that gives you the point values for each of the factors, those 9 factors. There's some details to that using that system that are important. They're all covered in the little manual. We also literally give you a file that you can utilize moving forward, so that you'll know the points evaluation for the final result, the final report for each position. So if someone comes and says, "Gee, I gave Sally a new task, and it's really a big important one, and I think Sally needs to be regraded upwards," whoever manages that department can say, "Okay, fine. Here's a position analysis questionnaire. Fill it out. Let us know what changed about Sally's job from the current job to what you're proposing to do with her." And then that comes back to HR. HR has the system and has been trained on it, and they can make their own judgment at that point as to whether or not a reclassification is in order. That gives them an objective basis for making a reclassification decision, and something to stand on. And what we found, and I've actually used the system as a manager before, and what I found as a manager, and certainly now as a consultant for Baker Tilly and Springstead, is that people tend to respect that system. They may, if they had to go build their own, they might build a different one. But the one that we have is solid. It stood the test of time. And if you use it day in, day out for all your decisions as a guide, it really tends to get a lot of respect from the staff. And so you're not just making it up on the spot. You're using a system.
Okay. So if that HR director is to make a reclassification, is that where it ends, or do you become involved at any point, or does it just end with us? Are we the end user at that point and we make these decisions?
No, it's your call. I mean, if you want us to assist, we do have clients that ask us back in, and we do maintenance. We call that maintenance work in our lingo, and we do that for some clients. Some of them fairly large, sophisticated. Some of them there in Indiana, in fact, we do work for. But at the end of the day, that's your call. We're glad to help. But you have all the tools, have all the training. Your HR staff will have everything they need to do that without us. So, and the other thing is, I should point out that we do or have historically retrained clients. If somebody changes out, if you lose somebody, you get a new person in a position that needs to learn more about it, we'll offer a training for them pretty much on some schedule that suits their needs. We don't typically charge for that. It takes an hour to do the training, and so moving forward, clients have access to us for information about the system, as well as just bringing us back to do it for fee.
So that'd be a fee-based system on the maintenance then? It's not part of the contract? that correct?
I'm sorry, that.
So is it
was
a fee,
having,
is it a fee-based system for any maintenance that we may need? It's not part of the initial contract?
We have a separate contract. We offer funds if they want it. It just, basically, it's just a contract that says, here's the terms for which we would come back and do the maintenance work. Then at the time the work is desired, they could establish the scope of the work, and we can establish a price for it. We don't. There are pre-priced items on there. It's sort of like a menu of things. So you can choose from that menu, or we can negotiate a separate price. Usually, it depends on the needs. If it's a large number of things, we'll just give you a fresh quote. But the contract itself is just to basically form the relationship and outlines how it works, what the steps are to get something, a work order issued for that additional work, whatever it is.
Great, thank you. One last thing, I promise. Are you able to share a generic, maybe a generic template of your scoring system that you provide an HR staff?
Sure, we can do that. It is copyright protected.
Sure.
So just know that it's not something we normally put into the public, but yeah, we can do that for you, sure.
Great, thank you. Anything else from council?
So I think you addressed actually pretty well what I was asking is this sounds like it's putting a tool where the goal is to be more managed by our own HR, and then they can reach out if they need assistance, or you're there kind of as a phone a friend, as I say, if you need to call someone for some backup. Is that kind of what I'm gathering, then it's really meant to be in that kind of regard?
So when we do the training, last slide includes mine and Gina's cell phones. And we encourage anybody to ask us questions at any time if they have them. Now, some clients that we never get a question today. On the other hand, Jada has spent a lot of her time answering questions from a certain client that's actually outside the continental United States, an American territory client there. But the bottom line is, we try to make ourselves available if there's a question, and we want to make sure that employees have direct access to us. For some employees that's important. For others, it's probably no big deal. But the truth is, we just want to make sure that we're available to them. If they have a question, we'll answer.
Anything else? Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. I think you cleared up a lot of the questions and concerns we had.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have had the opportunity to meet all of you, first of all, and to have the opportunity to discuss ourselves, our projects, and so forth. I appreciate the opportunity. I may be a little out of bounds. I just want to say I'm sorry to see the news in the last day or two. Bad situation that arose there in one of your students in one of your schools, and it sounded pretty tough, and I just wanted to say we were sorry to hear that. But at any rate, thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank Calissa for helping distribute the information in such short order. Melissa, thank you. We'll be getting this other information to you, and as a follow-up that we've promised here, the schedule is one of those things, and then an example of a grading sheet that we have done. Anything else? Did I get it all?
I think that's good. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you all. It's good to see you.
You too. Thank you. All right, we can move back now to communications from elected officials, other officials, or agencies of the county. Anyone from the council? Anyone from the audience? Elected officials, other officials, agencies of the county? Like to speak? Didn't see you back there, Johnny.
I had my Klingon cloaking device on.
There you go.
It was amazing listening to Baker Tilly's presentation. It's an entity that we use with the Vigo County School Corporation. It sounded very transparent. It sounded very engaged as far as the employees and the department heads. I love the fact that you'll get to see what the point system is, because we have never been allowed to see what the point system is. We have no idea how our jobs were graded the way they were or classified as they were. And I think that you should strongly consider going with this company. Thank you.
Joni? Gotcha. So is this what the corporation uses to
Yes,
score
we used
their
Umbaugh,
employees?
yep, and then we used the Baker Tilly.
Okay. How do you, I mean, obviously you feel pretty good about it?
I do.
assume?
Yes.
Okay.
I've always been very impressed with them, especially their accessibility and their ability to answer your questions clearly. You know, if you've ever had someone do a presentation, you think, what in the heck are they talking about? They're like, you know, being the smartest person in the room. I just like that they're really down to earth and accessible. Yes, Todd.
Yeah, Joni, if I could ask a question. So my interest in this is I'm all about if we have a basis. If we're talking about tax abatement, if we're talking about salaries, where we have somebody that comes in and they have a question and feel like they're being undercompensated or they're losing people, it's a concern. And I'd like to see that we have a methodology to be it through the HR's recommendation. I'm an electrician. I
Yes.
don't know about somebody in the health department's qualifications needed. So we're looking for somebody who has that expertise. But as you know, we're only really considering if it's which entity that we're going to fund or pay for as a council.
Okay.
So, but you feel like and I'm getting to my question here, do you feel like the school corporation utilizes that factor when you have something that a problem arises and you're having a shortage in one area, and how to fix that? Or a deficiency, or people leaving as they use this? What I thought was a great example, we're drawing out of this department all the time, people are leaving this department. How do we need to fix that?
Those things are taken into consideration, and we do discuss them as a school board. Obviously, the final decision is with Dr. Hayworth and with our HR, but those are things like, you know, we recently had our vacated safety director position, and it would be looking at what other school corporations of similar size were paying the director. Or what we do, we look at those kind of things, including our teachers, because that's one of, I think, the biggest drain on the school corporation is that we're having a hard time, or we've had a difficult time paying teachers a wage that's worth them staying in our county and not going to counties contiguous. And I know we experience that at the health department, because we do have specialty in positions that require particular college education, college degrees, like our environmental health division or our nurses. And it's difficult to compete against the private sector. Have an open position right now that has been probably over a month that we cannot get applicants for because the salary is so low.
And we're seeing this, he didn't address it, but I'm sure it's going to
Okay.
come up in the conversation, is it's like we have a new norm now where people now have work from home, or they want to work remote, or they have desires that I think that's something, the challenge that we have never faced before, county government and as well.
Sure.
You know, everybody wants to, I think they call it the great resignation, is what they call it. 30% of all employers have had a lot of people resign and don't want to come back after pandemic, or, you know, so I think we're going to have to address that too. And having an expert in it benefits, I believe, us.
I do too. I think everybody, private sector, government, everybody's looking at different work models due to the pandemic. And I think we'll all figure out what the best practices are.
Thank you.
Hello. One of my biggest regrets as a council person was and Aaron, I know you have done this, and Vicky as well, because I've worked with you guys before, but as a council person, I never really came to the annex or to the courthouse to meet department heads other than what they presented at a meeting. So I know you guys are all busy. I recognize that. We are too, and I was too as my time on the council. But if you have time to come here and walk department by department and get to meet the folks that are looking to you guys for whatever you're going to do, it would be tremendous. So just
I think that's a good point, and it's even tougher to do it when they don't like how you vote. And so the next day after I got some negative comment, I went to visit them. So I try to make myself accessible.
I mean,
I think it's a
it's,
great point, because how else are we going to understand their plight? So, I mean, I've tried to do that, and I've been out to see some of them already. And I've got to get over just being shy, though. That's the toughest thing that I've had.
You're in public office now, man.
Well, and I appreciate that too. Right when I jumped in, I did that, and I was trying to really take time on Mondays. That was kind of my day that I would do it. And it helped me on some of those early votes. It just so happened, like, one of the people I met was, the assessor, and then he came in and happened to do something. I understood what he was talking about. So for me, it was knowledge, but it was also nice to get around. Life's gotten a little crazy for me with family, but goal is to get back on that routine of just picking a day to do it every week once we get school off and running and going ahead. So we'll get back on that rotation. But yeah, no, it was probably a good thing. And, I like to meet people, and, might be a little shy too. Not as shy as Todd. But.
Anything else from council? How are we right now with the budget process? 2 more dates?
Last week and pretty much settled all the self-funded funds. And at your next meeting, it gets a little tougher, because we're going to start dealing with the levied funds
When's the next meeting?
next.
31st and the 1st, we'll be meeting all day on 2 days. I think we'll probably be able to knock out,
A lot of it.
yeah, I'd say we'll get the bulk of it done, if not all of it.
I discussed it with the BZA president, and he's amenable to taking their meeting to the commissioners, because I think their meeting's at 10 also, not 9:30. So they'll have it somewhere else.
But we could move ours over to the little room, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Anything else? There's nothing else. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Councilman Thacker, second by Councilwoman Wilson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Me adjourned.
No. It's like Brendan said, pledge of allegiance, he got knocked it. What the heck is